Hey guys, thanks for tuning in again and welcome to Talk 2 for this term as we continue our series in 1 Thessalonians. Hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at the reading, or you can look at that after this video, which is fine. And today I want to talk about something really interesting about pleasing other people, caring about what other people think about us. You know, often in your teenage years, and I know from my experience, which wasn't that long ago, but it kind of feels like long ago, is that we often really care about what our friends think about us than what our family does, what our teachers do, or kind of anyone else. Usually our friends, our peer group is kind of the most important group, and we really care about them. I mean, I know for me, I really tried hard to please them and to win their favor, because that's just how it is when you're a teenager. It's not always that way. It does change when you get a bit older. And you know what? Caring about what other people think about you, sometimes that can be a really good thing because it's the people that we care about. We don't want to let people down. But in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, Paul tells us that actually the most important person you need to care about what they think about you, or the most important person you need to please, is Jesus. And that is really interesting to think about, isn't it, in this day and age? And really the big thing I want to talk about today is walking and living in a way that is worthy of God, pleasing Him, honoring Him. And so we see in chapter 2 that Paul gives these really great examples of how he's serving this church. And he's not just talking and saying the words of Jesus and preaching, he's living it out. He's actually caring for the people, feeding people, nurturing them. And then he also picks up a side job to get a bit of money, not in a way to just get more money, but he's trying to not let the church be burdened by him and pay for him. He's actually just trying to get a wage so the church can continue to flourish. And we see that he's really living a life worthy of God. I encourage you to read chapter 2 because it's just really cool to see these practical examples of Paul serving the church. But anyway, we see that Paul really does care about what God thinks more than anyone else in this world. And let me read to you a little bit because we see that Paul actually suffered for preaching the gospel. So when he was in a place called Philippi, it says this: "We had previously suffered and been treated outrageously in Philippi, as you know, but with the help of God we dared to tell you his gospel in the face of strong opposition." So in that little bit we just read from verse 2, Paul is trying to take the gospel, the message of Jesus, far and wide, and he takes it to people that hate him, that probably yell insults at him, people that he might respect and admire. And these people, some of them, not only want to be angry with Paul and displeased with him, some people even tried to kill Paul. And eventually Paul does die for the gospel. I mean, what a challenge. What a great example of someone that's lived a life worthy of God. He cared way more about what God thought than the opposition, than the hurt he was going to receive from people. But why does he go through all of this? Well, because he cares more about what God thinks than what anyone else does. And so we see that then Paul kind of finishes this section that we look at in chapter 2 with verse 12. He says, this is how I kind of want you to live until Jesus comes back. He says, encouraging and comforting and urging you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory. I mean, this is a great verse where Paul is telling his readers and us today to live a life worthy of God. And so whatever you do in this life, is it for the Lord? Is it worthy of him? Probably not. We don't always get it right. It's hard to please God alone and not care about what other people think. Some of us probably do this really well, whereas others might really struggle with this. But we can't please God by our own effort. It's in Jesus' strength that we can please God. You know, what Jesus achieved on the cross 2,000 years ago was that he took all our sins. He became sinful so that we could become righteous. He has washed us clean from sin. We are now pleasing in God's eye because of what Jesus has done. And what's the great thing about that is we can continue to live a life that pleases God because of what Jesus has done. And how we do that is, we've got to make sure that you've accepted Jesus into your life, that you've repented, you believe, and you have a personal relationship with Jesus. That is so important, that you have a personal relationship with him, that you feel like you can talk to him anytime you can. So I'd like to finish with a great quote that I read in a commentary as I prepared this talk that kind of summarizes what I'm trying to say to you all, which is we are to be holy, righteous, and blameless because we are God's saved people, not so that we might become his saved people. So who are you? What is your identity? That's often the question we go through in our life, especially when you're young. Like, who am I? Well, if you really want to know who you are, Jesus knows exactly who you are. And if you want to know what he says about you and what he thinks about you, read the Bible. That's God speaking to us today. Pleasing God is most importantly thing you've got to do in your life over your friends. And look, pleasing our friends and family, that's not such a bad thing, but God's got to come first in your life. It's really good to do this because even the things that we do in secret for God, the things where no one sees what's going on, God sees it. And it doesn't go unnoticed. And it honors him. I mean, for example, right now I'm preaching in our beautiful church. No one is here. It's just me. I mean, thankfully, hopefully someone watches this later. But I'm preaching to really no one right now. But I'm actually honoring Jesus. And really that reminds me of why this is worth doing. The God of the whole universe cares about what I'm doing right now. And the fact that other people can hear this and hopefully they're changed and this can help people, that's a bonus. And that's awesome. So I encourage you to keep living a life worthy of God. If you're serving in any ministries, obviously they've been on break, but try and get back into them. Don't stop. Don't let lockdown, don't let busyness be an excuse to stop you. Keep living a life worthy of God. You know, if you're involved in kids' church, youth band, meteors, GFS, or any other thing at church, keep doing that because that pleases God. And he is honored and he cares about it. He is pleased when you do these things for him. If Jesus came back tomorrow, what would you want to find him doing? What would you like him to find you doing, I should say? Would you like him to find you serving and living for God in everything you're doing, whether that's at school or at work or at uni, or even when you are just doing ministry at church? Or do you want him to find you just serving yourself and living a life for yourself? Jesus is coming back, everyone. Are you ready? I don't think many people think about that enough, and I know I don't think about it enough. But I encourage everyone, Jesus is coming back. And let's live a life worthy of him. And we can do that together with God's grace. Thanks for tuning in again, guys. And hopefully we'll see you sooner rather than later. Thanks.